Hey, Rick, man, ready to get to it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Keith. I'm so glad that you showed up this morning in my mailbox in my house and also on a camera. I mean, it's just a total Keith Jones immersion today.
Oh, you got it, man. I'm glad you're good with it because I didn't ask. You said it's open door and I come in anytime I wanted to. I took that literal.
Doors unlocked, man.
All right, perfect. Perfect, man. Rick, you mentioned this several times in podcasts that you encourage anyone who listens to the shows to send questions or ask questions. And one of my colleagues asked a question and, she basically said that, she was listening to the podcast about making your daily life the practice. And she was asking about, the balance between peacefulness and passivity. So can you riff on that a little bit?
Well, it's not either or.
Right.
It's not either or. I mean, if you're peaceful, you can still be aggressive, or you can still be, how would you say it? An advocate for ideas and an advocate for change and an advocate for righting wrongs or an advocate for doing things better. The trick is that what people do is they confuse passivity with peacefulness, in the sense that peacefulness is a non-negotiable internal gyroscope. Okay. It's like a little reactor inside of you that never stops creating this sense of equanimity. And all of that comes from a practice which involves being mindful, that is, being present in the moment and not judging, being helpful to others, carrying out meditation so you can clear space. You can be out of yourself for a little bit of time. You can allow yourself to be less defensive because of the practice. Now, when you get into an environment where you feel like you have to advocate for something, which is all I do in my life, that's what I am, I'm a lawyer. That is a whole different thing. It has nothing to do with my inner gyroscope about how I feel peaceful. And that's not negotiable. What I'm doing, though, is I'm acting in a way that makes sense for me, in a well thought out, I hope, manner that brings about the result that I want. Two different things. One has to do with your soul. One has to do with what you do for a living or what you believe in. That needs to be changed. Two different things. So I don't think there is a conflict. I think the reason why people get them mixed up is because people think that I'll be perceived as passive if I am in fact peaceful. But I think people also realize that there are some people who are inherently peaceful and because of that peace are powerful. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Thich Nhat Hanh, who just died last week at the age of 94 or 95. That sense of power, that personal power, is something that you can tap into, but only if you're peaceful and in control of your own life and have this self-mastery that we're talking about that comes from the practice. It's not being passive in any way. That's that, I get a little bit incensed because I think people are confusing these concepts, and they're far away from one another.
Yeah, I know I confused them big time, man, in my life before I started doing the practice. And just like my colleague, it was something that I struggled with. And what really made me struggle with it is that I was on this path of cultivating inner peace. And for me, what peacefulness means is that I'm not fighting with myself. I'm not fighting within.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's well said.
Thank you. And that's where the fight is, because there are no external enemies, there may feel like there are, but there's just people out there with unconscious behavior or behavior that's hurtful and all those things. But again, what I'm trying to do is not confuse their behavior with who they are. That's not to say that though that behavior doesn't have consequences. Oh, life shows us time and time again that it has consequences. But I don't have to get involved with having an opinion about those consequences, because it'll take care of itself. And so with that allows me to maintain what you were talking about, Rick, this equanimity inside. But I remember this very, very, very well when I struggled. And what made me start to contemplate whether my peacefulness was in conflict or I was being passive was exactly what you said, Rick. It was what other people thought about me. And I remember a friend calling me one day who happens to be African-American, and we were actually high school sweethearts. And she called me one day, and out of the blue, we hadn't talked in like many years, and maybe like 20 years. And she
Wow.
came across, I guess, our website. And, she was like, so all this stuff going on in the world, and you're not like helping your people. I'm like, who's my people? Like humanity? Oh, I think I'm doing that, but she was being very specific as if to, and I remember feeling almost a little wounded by that. But
Yeah.
wounded, one was the ego being wounded, like, oh, should I be doing more? And should I be doing more for who she thinks I should be doing more, which I thought I was doing in some way, or was I being, but I was also, I wanted to take a view of my life, an objective view to see if there was more that I could do. And so I was like, am I being passive? I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I have a very, in some ways, a very privileged life. And am I not being sensitive to the struggles of other people? And I keep coming back to like, my contribution to humanity is to be a good person and to be kind to everybody, period. And I don't want to get into this us and them. When I think about, one of the people that you've mentioned who's an inspiring figure was Martin Luther King. I remember when I was, coming of age and learning a lot about history, and a lot of that history, made me very, very angry. And I remember thinking that his approach was passive. But if you, and especially when it was a young Malcolm X that was coming up during that time, and Malcolm X, before his death, he actually got on a path to where he was more aligned with King. And that was an amazing thing that happened from where he started. And there were others who really criticized the way King went about his work. But if you look back at the people whose approach or direct action, and King was very much about direct action. If you look about the people that had a peaceful approach and the people that had an antagonistic approach, mm-hmm. which one has had the lasting change, positive change and benefit? Oh, King's by far. And that was a peaceful approach. And so he took action, but it was intelligent action that was informed by peacefulness, by being peaceful. And I think that that's how I've been able to reconcile it is that I'm not passive at all. I'm very direct in terms of I'm going to be kind. I'm not indirect about it. I'm very direct about expressing my gratitude. I tell people thank you all the time for the many ways that they contribute and bless my life. I'm very, aggressive about it, but it's informed from a different place. And so I don't feel passive at all. I feel, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being passive. I just feel that when I was the other way of not being peaceful, I often or almost always created an us and them situation. And being peaceful does the exact opposite. It's all us, it's we. That's what peacefulness does. It transforms that kind of language that separates us, and it brings us together as a whole of humanity. And so for me, it was staying on the path and not stepping off the path. And it brought me to that point to where I said the way forward for me is to be peaceful. And in that, I think that I can be more effective in terms of making a contribution to everyone.
Well, that's a beautiful summation of it. The inner peace that we have that comes from the practice and comes from us trying to do the things that you've just outlined, that creates the space for us to be less reactive and less antagonistic. That creates the space to allow you to hold your own inner peace inside while you're still going off and doing things that are in the world that are difficult. And as I said earlier, it's a misconception to think that they're linked. Inner peace is not negotiable. The passivity that you perceive is about something that you want other people to see that you don't have. You don't want to be perceived as passive. But by letting things go, detaching from outcome, you're actually contributing to your own inner peace. That doesn't mean that you're passive about it. It just means that you find a way to express, but that expression has nothing to do with your own equanimity, your own inner peace and your own inner happiness. The clearing of the space allows us to be more proactive, I found. when I can get rid of all of that stuff about how other people perceive me and whether I'm going to be considered passive, if I can clear all of that out, that allows me to be proactive and I can jump into it more effectively. I just think that folks have to be very careful about wanting to appear to be non-passive in order for their egos to be satisfied, when really they should be focusing on following a path that allows you to develop a sense of self-worth, high regard, helping other people, compassion, non-judging, and all of that contributes to non-suffering. And the non-suffering is what allows you to be more proactive.
Right. And I think, Rick, along the lines of what you're saying, that I see several examples of that in the community and at Mayo Clinic. Like Mayo Clinic is very interested and committed to representation of people from diverse backgrounds. And that includes gender identity, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity. It includes all of that. And the way that when I say at Mayo Clinic, we're going about it is it's one that is rooted in this idea of being a contribution to humanity, uplifting everyone up, right? And as opposed to we're, going about it a different way, where a lot of people or organizations go about it, which is this us or them, and you're so rooted and like we got to stamp this out, but if you just root it in, we're just going to do good.
Yeah.
Like we're just going to do good. And that's what I think the peacefulness focuses on, is we're just going to do good. And so as opposed to stopping this, so let's say something like voter registration, right? Something political, which we don't talk about a lot. Let's say it's this. Instead of saying that, hey, we're going to stop the people that are making it harder for people to, who are citizens to vote, legal citizens, or however you want to say it, to vote, we're going to make it harder to stop their efforts. How about saying we're going to increase our efforts to make it possible for people to have that? Instead of saying like we're, you become for something that uplifts all of humanity. Like that's a different proposition. And when you are operating from a place of inner peace like that, what you have the likelihood to do is the likelihood of bringing more people in to support that noble cause, that great effort. I mean, one of our colleagues at Mayo Clinic wants to increase the number of the people of color in medical school. And a lot of them, it's an incredible organization called Elevate Med. It's a nonprofit. And really, we know that there's incredible health disparities in our country with people of color. And so she feels very strongly that doctors and going to medical school is a system that just has so much debt associated with it by the time someone can actually start to practice medicine. And for a lot of reasons, people of color sometimes are more disadvantaged from the starting gate. And so she's come up with this cause, but she's made it about something and for something, Dr. Porter, in that everybody shows up for her event that are different backgrounds, ethnicities, races, everything else. Like, it's inclusive. Mm-hmm. And that's operating from a peaceful place to address a very serious issue and problem. And so I don't think it's, like you said, Rick, that being peaceful is synonymous with being passive, or that there needs to be a balance between the two. I think for me, it's just one thing. It's just being peaceful, and there's nothing else. And then any other action that I take is informed from that space. And I don't worry about, what my mind says about it or what somebody else says about it too. When I have this friend, man, there was one election many, many years ago that I was so invested in that it went in a different direction. I remember being like, oh God, I was so distraught and just a mess inside, suffering. Mm-hmm. And fast forward 20 plus years, my friend who I was talking about, and we was having this very heated conversation of us and them and all this other stuff, she's still living that life, man. It's almost paralyzed her to make contributions to everybody, to all people, because she's so rooted in that idea, and she's an activist. but what kind of activist are you? Are you an activist that is for something that benefits everybody? or you're an activist that only benefits a few, you know? And so I want to be the kind of person that is a contribution to everybody. And I found that being peaceful allows me to do that in the most effective way.
Beautiful stuff, man. Love it. Always love being with you, Keith. Thanks.
That
Thanks.
too, Rick, man. You contributed to my education in more ways than you know, man. I just appreciate what you do. And sometimes we need to share with the folks about what you do in terms of your law practice, man. You give so much back to the community and how you serve, man.
I lose a lot, though, Keith. I lose, I lose a lot. You got to keep that in mind, too. I mean, but winning and losing, you know, the Zen teachers say winning and losing, same thing.
Exactly. There's no difference, right?
We can get into that later. That's a different idea. But
absolutely, man.
Beautiful job today, Keith. I love listening to you talk about your experiences and what you've learned and how you're applying that. It's a marvelous thing.
Thank you, Rick. But yeah, man, you know, this peaceful thing, man, God, I just found I've been more effective when I've been on that road and that path, man, and happier, much happier. So I love you, Rick.
I love you, Keith. We'll see you next time.
I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.